This is Nick Brana, the national chair of the People's Party. I'm here with Robos and Buzzy, and so much happened this week that we thought we got to go live here at the end of the week, and we got to cover a bunch of it. So we're going to talk about the midterm results. It's now been finalized. The Republicans took the House. Democrats are keeping the Senate. A lot of interesting implications for that. Trump declared. Nancy's out. Then we've got, of course, the Democrats leading the charge for World War III. So we're going to be talking about that too. The missile that landed in Poland. So we got all this to cover. Klaus Schwab saying that even talking about how the age of American hegemony and Western hegemony is over. So we got a lot to talk about. So yeah, gonna take us into our first story. But first, I'll say, how you guys doing? Buzzy, E?
Good. Excited to chat with you guys. The world's crazy. We all know it. I'm glad we're just gonna broadcast our little commentary on the descent. E?
The Rock has come back to the podcast.
It is good to be back. All right. So I'm going to start us off on our first story. So this, I'll bring it up here. So I think as everybody knows, Bernie Sanders, of all people who I used to work with, took to, we confronted him, myself, Jonathan Blazer, in Pittsburgh 2 days before the midterms at a rally that he had. We confronted him 3 times. And on the third time, he just snapped and absolutely let us know what he thinks and what his mentality is. And it's extremely revealing about what Bernie Sanders has become. So we'll play this clip now. And so everybody can hear. This is on the Jimmy Dore show when Jimmy had me on to share this confrontation of Bernie and what he ends up saying. So here's the clip.
You thought Bernie Sanders didn't have the balls to stand up, huh? So here you are. You went to confront Bernie Sanders over arming Nazis. Where was this, Nick? Where was he giving a speech?
This was in Pittsburgh on Sunday.
Okay, so
Could you make it louder?
This election is about our economy.
Bernie, you're leading us to nuclear war! Bernie, you're going to start a nuclear war!
To billionaires and then cut.
I like how the people go, shut up with your nuclear war.
Is that going to end racism?
Can y'all hear it?
It's a little low.
Okay.
I'm familiar with it.
Let me see if I can do anything with it.
Security.
Why are you funding this war in Ukraine, Bernie? You can stop it!
Some disagree.
Bernie, you know we overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014!
Of taxes.
This is pointless if we have a nuclear war! You will kill us all!
The minimum wage to a living wage.
Stop funding this war! Stop funding this war, Bernie! We trusted you! You were supposed to lead a revolution! You're leading us to annihilation in Ukraine!
We are taking on people who have unlimited amounts of money.
But
Bernie,
Bernie,
the money.
where is our money going?
The money.
You're sending money to Nazis in Ukraine.
We're not going to let people disrupt our
Yeah,
meeting.
apparently it's too long.
Why did you oppose the letter? On sending money You're starting a nuclear war with Russia. You were supposed to start a political revolution. So that's not only how Trumpers react to protesters, but that's how Bernie Sanders supporters are reacted now. Not people who are left, people who still don't willfully want to see what Bernie Sanders actually is, which is a simp for empire and Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. That's what Bernie actually is. He's not actually a fighter for progressives. He's not actually a revolutionary. Bernie is a willing tool of empire, imperialism, Wall Street, and the military-industrial complex. That's who Bernie actually is. And I know it's hard to believe that, but that's who he is, which is why he's being protested and why people are reacting like Trumpers at a Trump rally against actual lefties who are standing up against nuclear war. You think Bernie would stand up against nuclear war, and then you remember Bernie's been for every frickin' illegal intervention.
Who is still standing around listening to Bernie that isn't utterly disappointed with him? And
so these are just regular Democrats who now they welcome Bernie because Bernie
is chaining for
yeah.
Democrats?
So it's like, oh, he's going to say something nice about my corporate Democrat. I'll like Bernie. That's what this is.
I see.
Okay, there's more to this.
Instead, for some money, you're starting a third world war, Bernie.
Why are you voting to fund a nuclear war, Bernie? Why are you voting to fund a nuclear war, Bernie? Will you answer our
Let me
question?
ask you a question.
Why?
Who's paying you?
No. So Bernie comes over to an anti-war protester, and instead of answering the anti-war protester's question, Bernie Sanders says, "Who's paying you?" That's what Bernie Sanders said to an anti-war protester, holding his feet to the fire. Now, you've heard Bernie and AOC and every other liar politician say that you're supposed to pressure politicians. It makes us better. And Bernie Sanders is, again, is just as big a hypocrite as anybody when it comes to politics, because there's an anti-war protester trying to hold him accountable. And what does Bernie Sanders do? Does he give that guy respect? Does he give that guy the respect he deserves and actually answer his question? Does he fold his hands like he did when two black women took his microphone away? No, he doesn't, because that was virtue signaling, because what he's doing right now is the real Bernie Sanders when he smears an anti-war activists as some those who have to be paid off to be against nuclear war. What's the truth is Bernie is acting in his own self-interests. And Bernie he's been paid off. I don't know where or what, but Bernie is paid off by his reputation. Bernie doesn't want to be on the outs with the Democratic Party. He doesn't want to turn into Ralph Nader. That's his payoff.
So that's Bernie incredibly red baiting and Russia smearing me, who he knows, and I don't know if it comes across in the clip, but when he, when I was there and when I asked him the question, he actually, he was determined to get to me to say that, because he pushed his security guy out of the way, who was putting himself between the two of us, and came to me to put his, finger in my face and, say, "Who's paying you? Who's paying you?" And it's just so pathetic because, on the campaign that I spent a year working with Bernie to make him president. And in doing that, in that campaign in 2016, and then again in 2020, he ran against the endless wars. And here's Bernie, not only funding this war that could go nuclear, but sending billions of dollars to Nazis, in Ukraine, and doing that instead of this is the money that he's appropriating, instead of appropriating money for housing, for healthcare, for better wages, for a public works program. It's just pathetic what Bernie's become.
Yeah. It's funny, Nick, because I said I had a question for you about this, and I didn't tell you what it was, but you've worked past all that, and my question to you was more like, how did your heart feel in that moment when a guy that you really worked for and believed in and was truly the beacon of change, or fight, or morality, or someone who, even against all odds, was going to preach truth to power, was now using things better, remember when he was in the Russian bathhouse, all of a sudden he's a Russian, or now remember Elizabeth Warren, Bernie said women can't be presidents. No, all those times we took knives, all us Bernie bros, and all that negative energy. And here he is. And he's just throwing you at that point, saying all that. And he never did that before. He didn't really call out people. They called out, he never made a slur like that. And that's the thing that was killing me right there. And I was wondering how you must have killed you at some point. I know you're righteous in your anger, and you have every right to be. But in that moment, I was heartbroken across the world for so many of us who were like, what? dude, that's what they said about you. It's not true. And why would you? I mean, you got off the tarmac in, was it Nevada? And the New York Times said Russia's trying to help you win presidency. You didn't even get to that level of ugliness. But here,
Exactly.
you and you're protesting, and he was on point because early on, I gotta say, he's on point. He's ignoring all that. He's going, rich people, rich. It's right on. But to all of a sudden, he knew you hit a nerve, brother, and I just know he
Yeah.
had to hit a nerve back at you at some point. Somewhere you were like, this was our guy, and now he's like, now my heart broke for you, for Bernie, for ourselves, for humanity, for the world. But I just want to know how did you process that? How did you process?
Well, I mean, the first thing I'll say, and something that might have had something to do with it, I would guess, is the fact that Bernie and I have had many disagreements since I worked with him on the campaign. And when I worked with him on the campaign, I lobbied the DNC members for him. That was my job as a national political outreach coordinator. I went to Iowa with him. I went to New York, with him. He picked me from among 2,000 staff on the campaign to be one of 13 to found Our Revolution with him. But that's about where our, our agreements ended. I mean, I encouraged him to run third party after the nomination was stolen by Hillary Clinton and the DNC collusion. He didn't want to do that. Afterwards, I went on to work with him in Our Revolution. And about a month afterwards, he betrayed a promise that he had made to those of us who founded Our Revolution with him, to remain independent of big money, to not take big money. So he immediately, sought to take billionaire money influenced by Jane Sanders and Jeff Weaver. And I was the first one among the staff to stand up and say, no, in this campaign that we just waged, we fought against taking big money. We fought for independence from billionaire money. And I will be damned if now I am going to see this organization, which is supposed to carry on the hopes and the dreams and the work and the sweat and the blood and the tears that went into that campaign, where we fought for. And I said, I'm not putting up with that. And I'm going to try to talk you out of it. But if I can't do that, I'm leaving. And most of the staff ended up coming with me when I took that stand against Bernie. But that was far from the last disagreement. After that, of course, we invited him we said, Bernie, you had 13 million primary voters in 2017. When we started Draft Bernie, we said, come on, Bernie, you've said you want to make this radical change for years, decades. Well, you used to say before you got into Congress that we needed a third party. Now's your chance. Turn those 13 million voters into a political party, run in 2020 as president of that political party, and you can break this political system. You can break it. You're at the end of your career. You're 76 years old at the time. What do you have to lose? Not only did he not want to do that, he wanted to run as a Democrat again, but he just, completely blew off 50,000 of his biggest supporters, from the campaign, didn't do anything. And so, then years later to actually confront him 3 times and have on the, overfunding Nazis in Ukraine, leading us to World War III, and then having him come up to me and say, who's paying you? Who's paying you? I mean, it just has to be the most pathetic symbol about what Bernie has become, about the establishment, the complete establishment tool that he has become. I mean, he went out of his way to condemn the progressives that, momentarily sent a letter calling for negotiations, not even calling for the end of the funding or any of that, just calling for negotiations in the war in Ukraine. So there's like some other off ramp than endless war until it goes nuclear. But this is who he is, and really, to an extent, this is who he's always been, especially when it comes to foreign policy. He supported the NATO bombing in Yugoslavia. He had a bunch of people who protested him for that, arrested 30 people in his office. This has been, he supported the F-35 program in his district. But just like all the other, members of Congress, by, taking his cut of the military industrial profits in his district. So this is who he is. And what's the lesson I think that I take from this most is about how nobody survives the Democratic Party. Everybody gets co-opted. If Bernie Sanders can get co-opted, you're going to get co-opted. Summer Lee, whoever the fuck else goes in there, you're going to get co-opted. Don't pretend. Don't tell yourself anything different. You're going to become a part of the machine, just like all the rest of them.
Right on, brother. I that's more the answer I needed. It was spot on. You know what? And an evolution. It wasn't like in that moment that your heart was made or broken. It's been evolved, and you've been working this process for a long time with the same ethic, and I appreciate that. And that was my question, and I'll let E get any word he wants. But thanks, Nick. I really appreciate that response. I'm all in. That's 100%.
We were speaking prior to this stream. I was saying that how the student surpassed the teacher, right? And it's what Jimmy mentions about, what I call the Democratic Party, the Shitocratic Party. Nobody, you don't change the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party changes you.
Yeah.
And it's a graveyard for social movements, as Kashama Sawan eloquently stated. And one of my favorite memes is this guy's climbing into a great white's mouth, right? The great white shark, and he's climbing in it. And he says, "Don't worry, when I get in there, I'm going to change everything. Right? I'm going to change it all around." And then there's another one. There's another one that I like, where there's a picture of the mob, like the classic, I guess it was from the 30s, the 20s or the 30s, like, Giancana and all the heavyweight Sicilian mafia. And they said, if you don't like the mob, you don't like the mafia, join them and change it from the inside. Yeah, so you got like all the heavyweight Sicilians sitting there in one picture and talking about, you go join them and try to change it from the inside. They got some cement boots. They got some cement boots waiting for you.
Speaking of change it from the inside, let's talk about the midterms. I mean, did anything change? Did I miss something? Did the Democrats win by losing the House? Because they're spiking the football as if they just won.
They're the most celebratory losers I've seen. But that's typical of them. It's like I don't know if Nick invented you, if he got it from someplace else, but it's most apt. It's like the people are leaving from us, we the people. We keep leaving from one burning building through the exit door right into another burning building. But I used to think that the prior to when Trump was still in charge, I used to look at the Democratic Party as like a movement, not even a movement, but like a settlement that's going in quicksand. Whereas the other ones, the Republicans, were all like an inferno. But now, they've outpaced the Republicans with fascism, with reactionary policy, pro-wars, like all the stuff we used to complain about the Republicans and the neocons are doing. The Democratic Party has took that and excelled it. And it's the same pattern that we saw with Obama and with Clinton before him, when they have these majorities. I think in Obama's case, it was a supermajority. They have the power to do everything. They control the alphabet soup, all the federal agencies and the federal government. They control both houses of Congress. And they'd be like, oh, well, we have to negotiate with the Republicans, right? We need the Republicans to come to the table. And they start saying this, and you saw it with Biden. Inside the first week to 2 weeks, Chuck Schumer, two-cup Chuck there, and Biden, and then Pelosi. We need better, we need Republicans to make us better. And that's their virtue signal right there. that tells you they're not. It's not even the first 100 days. Then they start saying that, like the first 7 days, or sometimes the first 14 days. They're telling you right there they're not going to do shit. Right? They're not going to do anything. They're not codifying Roe v. Wade. They're not giving
Right.
health care for all, Medicare for all. They're not doing a living wage. They didn't even want to do the. They haven't even done the $15 minimum wage. Right? So
Exactly. They
yeah.
didn't even stick to their own moderate promises. Yeah, so let me put this up. These are the results of the midterms. This is what we got in the end. All right. So it was just called like a couple days ago that the Republicans took the House. All right, and the Democrats are going to keep the Senate. So they're going to keep it on a very thin margin. So hey, right? Maybe Bernie Sanders will maybe now he'll do something, right? Because he has that 50th vote and they need him. Ha ha ha. Yeah, because he's had that for the last 2 years. Of course not. He's not gonna do
Psych.
shit.
It's
gonna
like
do shit.
psych.
Exactly.
Or Angus King, the other independent from the state of Maine, right here, who will always run. He runs as an independent, but he caucuses with a Democrat. But when it comes down, when the meat and potatoes, it's always to the conservative, to the red. He does not stand. He is Bernie light. Angus
Right.
King, Angus
Sheep
Collins,
dipping.
Susan King, same people.
So
They're all just. I'm sorry. Right.
yeah,
Look
no,
at this map.
no,
Look at the map.
that
Ridiculous.
that's
The
true.
military
That's true.
calls it sheep dipping.
They're
Like what the
fake
Polish
independent.
soldiers are doing. They dip themselves in Ukrainian uniforms and try to fight the Russians. Sheep dipping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, now what's interesting here is one of the things that I've seen happening now that the Republicans have taken the House is that they are they're treating this differently. In their contest, in their leadership determination, they are actually contesting McCarthy. There's about 30 Republicans who voted against McCarthy for House leadership. And so they're making demands. They're making demands like they're trying to reduce, the power of the speaker. They wanted the power to eliminate this or to remove the speaker, which was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And so, of course, and then they're making, I think they're going to start making more policy demands, so they're actually, so there's a possibility. It's so funny. They don't have to be pushed, even by the activists, on the right in order to force the vote. Here we are 2 years ago at this time, and it was like the entire, Bernie movement, the whole kind of populist left pushing the squad to force the vote, and they wouldn't do it. And here are, of course, the Republicans. They're making demands immediately. They're making demands without having to be told, and it's such a stark contrast, like between the two parties.
It's a fraud. We know this. It's just I'm going to be the bad guy and I'm going to be the good guy. In fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day in Congress said, "I want accountability for every dollar spent in Ukraine." That woman said so
Right.
many dumb things in her life, but never in the history of her life has she ever put a sentence together in the most powerful chamber. She nailed it, and I don't want to. But that's how disorienting this thing is
Thomas
all
Massey
about.
said it too.
And they're right. Like what?
Yeah.
Where,
Yeah.
So that was Bernie. Remember, no one's in the chambers. But I don't want to get back to that. But 100%. And so there's no change. It's just more the same and little. Anyways,
But this makes me think, Buzzy, maybe there will be enough Republicans who would oppose funding the war and be in favor of auditing all the war spending so far that they could force the vote on McCarthy. That all they'll need. So the Republicans are going to end up with about 222. So they'll have a margin of 5. So it'll be about a margin of 5. McCarthy won't be able to lose 5 people. That's even less than the margin that it would have taken to force the vote. Back then we needed like 15 people. And so 5, there's 2 of them already. There's Thomas Massey, there's Marjorie Taylor Greene. If there are 3 more of them that say no more money to Ukraine, otherwise, and that's
That's a
our
wrap.
condition. That's our condition for electing you Speaker, McCarthy. Then
Right,
he's going to have to give them that.
And no consultant's gonna tell Marjorie Taylor Greene that doesn't work for her, because when she's out in the streets and where she's just a true, I don't want to say a pawn, but she's been put in a position of immense power because people can't control, the Republicans can't control their caucus. They let the fringe. In fact, another thing is the Democrats fund the fringe to put this echo loop into destruction in our society by pushing fringe candidates. So they go in the primary and all of a sudden they win this shit and we start spiraling and lose humanity. And so now we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who's just like speaking actual truth, because when she goes in the street, no one gives a shit about Ukraine. No one gives a shit about that shit. Nobody. They cared about, like, am I going to have Christmas or am I buying oil in the north? Up here, like in other sections, am I having water? Like, like what's going on in the real time is more important than this fictional argument that they're going to have. And the fact that she's speaking truth to power right now is mind-boggling to me. And so again, the election will have consequences. I love the fact that that's why I say that when the Republicans have power, a little bit of power, they don't know how to organize. They're just going to go push, push, push. Or Democrats have power, we just kneel. Because kneeling is because they have the people behind them, because they know a majority of people vote Democratic because their ideas on paper and what they promote sound good. And when they get there, they have to stunt that. They have to kill that. And Republicans would birth a monster. If a guy with a mustache came back and could win the Bible Belt and a few Western states, he could be the next president and no problem. The Democrats, it would be kind of a probably more of an Italian guy who liked pasta. I don't want to get too like how much it's the same fascism, but in a different color. My rant's done.
Well, let me put it up actually
Yeah.
while we talk. And here we go. Yeah. Yeah, we shared them. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, I want an audit of where every penny has gone to funding Ukraine. Everybody's okay with that, right?
Right.
And here is Thomas Massey. We should immediately stop payments to Ukraine and begin a thorough audit of the $60 billion that Joe Biden and Congress have already sent. And both of these were like super viral tweets. Look at that, 160,000.
Yeah.
Twitter's really glitching out. You can freaking tell that all these people are getting like fired and laid off.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I'm serious. It's been glitching
As it
out
should be.
Yes.
like the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Here's like this one also super viral tweet. So it's like, just get 3 others.
Let me
Get
see the
3
meme.
others.
Could you
in
scroll
the
down to the
Republican
meme?
Caucus, and you'll and you can make them do that.
And Nick,
Could you scroll down to the meme a little bit?
It's a winning argument. No longer funding Ukraine. Right. Appreciating the Ukraine situation is one thing. Funding it with billions of dollars of taxpayer money at the expense of an unending war, all the while inability to even understand the world is kind of like, forming multipolarity organizations behind us, and just to we just need to understand that the war is not going to be a winner, and they know this. It's confusing to everyone. Like the war, the money laundering thing is working because we've spent billions of dollars and just keep like what money going in, money going out. But there's no other than your little Ukraine flag on your people's. There's no real love for this thing. You know what I mean? And Europe's going to be. I'm jumping ahead, but.
Right. No. But here's why I want to ask you guys what you think. But here's why I think it's a good thing. Like, all right, we had the full Democrat control of government. We had that. We've had that before. We had it under Obama. We had it under Clinton. They did nothing. We had it now under Biden. Nothing that not even the things that they promised, let alone the kinds of things that we need. Healthcare for all. A much higher minimum wage. All that. So I'm happy to see the Republicans take a chamber, because at least now they're going to be able to hold the Democrats accountable to some degree for some of these things that they've done, because we know the Democrats, they don't do a goddamn thing. Heck, they're more warmongering than the Republicans when they have office, to the point of instigating World War III. And so here, the Republicans at least, and they better, I don't trust McCarthy to do this. So there's some of the Republicans, like, Majority Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, others are going to have to hold them accountable. We're going to have to make them do this, to follow through on this. Some of these things I expect them to do now that they're in charge. Now that they're in charge in the House, they have subpoena power. And so the Republicans can now investigate the Democrats for all the shit they've done, and good for them. And so here's some of the things that McCarthy mentioned that they plan on investigating them for. Hunter Biden, great. Break that down. That ties into the war in Ukraine. Investigate the shit out of that. Also, I hope that that before the midterms, they said they were going to investigate the origins of COVID, and they better follow through on that too, because I want to see them. Here we go. They do talk about it too. Fantastic. Because that we need that too. They're going to investigate the Afghan withdrawal. So, I mean, I think this is a good thing. What do you guys think?
They sort of remind me of the Tea Party, the way they went in there and, like, from the first press conference, laid out their demands and their agenda, their initiatives, and the original Orange Man, Boehner, if you remember that guy, they forced him out, right? And the Tea Party started on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Rick Santelli, I think back in 2009. Yeah, Rick Santelli, because his whole big thing that Obama was going to come in there and tax them, that was a red herring. He wasn't coming in there to do anything. It was in 2011, according to the Levy Institute, he gave over 29 trillion with a T, mostly around 30 trillion to bail out Wall Street, while he allowed 8 million people to go homeless, take their homes, based on a derivative scheme manufactured by the same zombie bankers. But they went in there and they went to work. So, we were trying to get forced to vote. We were trying to get them to march for Medicare for all and all this stuff. They went in there, they're organized. They do have message discipline. So they all got on the same page, and they're outlining exactly what they want to do, how they're going to do it. And it's a lot more action than, the shit squad, all with their identity politics and their virtue signaling and the Instagram page of what type of nail color and all this kind of shit. It's like the personal narcissism and these people just trying to sell books, do speaking tours, get on the cover of Vogue, go to their rich friends, their rich Hollywood friends party, so they can virtue signal, address, tax Wall Street. That's what these people are about, right? So they were supposed to be activists, and that's why people supported them. And they went right in there, and their very first vote was not to challenge Nancy Pelosi, but to make sure she stays in power. And it's been all downhill since. And the last thing I'd say about that is that there's even Pix 11, which is a local sort of like also ran TV channel here. Even they were slamming AOC. They had a report. They were sharing a report a few years ago that she's one of the least productive members of Congress, right? And people that don't understand how Congress operates, you can propose anything, right? I could propose Big Bird become president, right? Or Ernie and Bert get married, right? But when you could propose something, but actually putting the bills together, getting the support to get the bills through, to bring it on the floor, so she could propose 1,000 things, and it all dies in the charnel house of proposal. And people don't understand that. She gets on Instagram and say, hey, I'm requesting more toilet paper for the immigrants in ICE detention. And then it just dies right in the proposal bucket. And people think that she's doing this great thing. She's actually one of the least productive members of Congress.
I think she's a social media influencer who just
Yeah,
happened to find her. She's a social media influencer first, who happened
yeah,
to find is using her congressional career to propel her future product
Yeah.
brands. Wait for it. Wait for it. I'm
You know,
calling it right
yeah.
now.
Her
There's going
platform
to be AOC brands.
her
yeah.
platform wasn't Hollywood. Her platform or New York. Her platform was DC. And we haven't seen
Exactly.
cultural heroes like that or cultural influences. But I want to get back to that one thing, and I think it ties together everything we talk about here. Like with the Republicans winning and taking over the House, it's going to show. And I'm a gambling person, but it's going to show that the last two presidents will either be impeached or be up for impeachment over funding a country that 10 years ago 90% of the US population would have no freaking clue was even on the map. And it has to do with both money laundering and the same party running the same schemes over the same deal. It will come together. There's going to be a breaking of because the hatred of the left towards Donald Jr., which I can feel, and the hatred to from the right to Hunter Jr., which I can empathize with, will come together, and it's coming together now, and we see it. There's no difference, and I hope that, like, yeah, where's this money going, and let's just put a light on it. I don't think because I don't think the people that are pushing it, like Nick would even say, was like Massey or Green are principled in this thing. They're just following what they think is right because that's what the public's telling them, and that's a true politician. And they're even as bought and corrupted, just monopolized. They haven't made any decisions that hurt the company brand yet. This is kind of like, okay, you got to sell yourself, but if they're not going to get off the reservation too far, they'll be shut right down. I mean, seriously, they will neuter Marjorie Taylor Greene quickly, or Massey, or anyone who fights the war machine like that if they get too far off the reservation. And right now, she spoke that shit. Let's see how it goes. Because the country has an
Yeah.
interest in it. And again, remember, the corporate media does not want to sell this story. It doesn't have to be sold. The people want it, but they're not even going to promote it. They're not even going to give it air. They're going to disrespect it, disorient you with so much bullshit. I don't understand. Ukraine, Minsk Accord, Russia. Oh my God. Anyways.
Exactly.
I would just add a small thing to what you said, Buzzy. You don't have to go 10 years ago for people to find that they can't find Ukraine on a map. Before February 24th of this year, nobody was talking about Ukraine.
Yeah.
Before February 24th, except for those of us that's been looking at it since the past 8 years or so. But let's go back to February 24th of this year.
That's why Trump was impeached, failing to fund weapon sales to Ukraine. The current president is going to be impeached or going to be attacked on this thing, and it's going to be the last two presidents will be attacked over war funding to a. Anyways,
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. They impeach presidents
Yeah.
over the dumbest things,
Yeah.
going back to like Nixon. Even
Yep.
Nixon is hilarious. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't spy on a rival political party rival. But, at the same time, now constitutional lawyer Barack Obama started spying on all 330 million Americans, as Snowden revealed, those programs. And so, apparently that's not an issue, collecting everything, we do or say on our phones or computers. Same thing with Trump. They could have and they, of course, if they were going to impeach him, they should have impeached him on the horrific corporate oligarchical policies, or even the fact that people think that Trump is better when it comes to foreign policy or Russia. But Trump did a lot of things to lay the groundwork for the war to where it got. He helped undermine nuclear weapons treaties and dissolve nuclear weapons treaties, pull out of those with Russia. He also continued the Obama-Biden policy of funding and supporting the Nazis in Ukraine. That remained a U.S. policy, which Trump did not change, and so that build up, that support was consistent throughout Trump's term. And so it's a good point, Buzzy. You brought it up. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey can say these things, and hell, that's more than the very low bar that the progressives have set, which is literally below underground. But still, the question is, are any of these people going to follow through? Because Trump made a lot of promises, and I don't think they will either. I don't think they will either. That, both parties completely corrupted. There's so many mechanisms within both parties to curtail or control anybody who steps out of line. And they're as a last resort, they can always they can redistrict you out of your seat, as they did to Dennis Kucinich. And so I don't think that when it comes down to it, any of these people, whether it's Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Donald Trump, are really going to oppose the military-industrial complex. I don't think we saw it from when Trump was president. He said he was going to get out of NATO. What happened to that? And so he continued the war in Syria and the extraction and the occupation of Syria. So much of this just continued under Trump, because ultimately the presidents are just figureheads. It's really the national security complex, that is driving the military industrial complex, the CIA. They're the ones making the decisions, actually. So I agree with you when it comes to that. But this is a good segue to talking about some of the other news that we wanted to talk about. And so this is the developments, the horrifying developments in the war in Ukraine. And so 3 days ago on Tuesday, the world almost ended in a nuclear war. It almost ended in Article 5 being triggered because there was a missile that landed from Ukraine, landed in Poland, and it killed 2 people. And originally, that's so funny. That's so funny. They changed that headline. Hilarious. Look here how it says Russian missile crossed into Poland, killing 2, U.S. official says. So that was the original headline. The original headline was the media, citing an unnamed source in the Biden administration, saying that it was a Russian missile that had killed 2 people in Poland. Okay. And then they just ran with that narrative for almost a day, even though they they knew it wasn't true. Here they changed the headline: U.S. and NATO investigate blast in Poland to kill 2. Biden says missile unlikely to have been fired from Russia. Oh, what do you know? In the end, NATO says missile that killed 2 likely fired from Ukraine, likely fired by Ukraine, defending against Russian attack. So, what do you know? It was a bullshit story in the end. It actually came from Ukraine. And I really liked Kim.com had an amazing take on this. He said, Ukraine executed the false flag attack on Poland so poorly that there was no chance to blame Russia without losing all credibility. Now the West is calling it stray missiles and an accident, adding that none of this would have happened if Russia didn't invade Ukraine. Idiots.
Yeah.
I think he nailed it. I think that's exactly what happened. I think that they know that these 200,000, 300,000 Russian troops are about to, become active. They're about to enter the war. The ground is freezing in Ukraine. It's going to support it's going to support Russian military vehicles that are going to come in. And so these retreats that Russia has been making strategically, essentially allowing Ukraine to take Kherson, allowing them to take back territory. They've been buying time. Colonel Douglas MacArthur, Scott McGregor, Scott Ritter, they've said this. They've said that Russia's basically buying time, and now when these troops become active, it's going to just completely change the entire orientation of the war, and Ukraine is going to get crushed. And so I think this was a move of desperation on Ukraine's part, and an attempt to bring Poland and NATO into the war, because we know these lunatics in Ukraine, Zelensky, I mean, heck, he has basically said that NATO should launch a preemptive nuclear war against Russia. So that's the extent to which these people are willing to go rather than negotiate.
We've been dodging false flags for how many months now? The ghost of Kiev, the
Snake
Russian
Island.
Snake Island,
Yeah.
Russian soldiers with Viagra raping. I mean, it's the same thing. We've all, if we're old enough to see it, we remember the Iranian's niece at the down talking about the babies and incubators in Kuwait and stuff like. We've dodged so many false flags, and they don't know. They right now, I think the military industrial complex is like, we can't get a pulse. There's not even a pulse beat for this war right now in the United States. There's not even like, other than some people with a flag, there's not even a mantra. Like there's no traction for it. So it's going to be really tough. And I mean, but the scary thing, Nick, and I absolutely 100% is like, they're trying. Like, they're not afraid to go this crazy. Like, where oops and daisy missiles, they started this fight as an argument instead of like, why are friggin' missiles flying into, like, in Poland? Don't act as if. Don't act as if. You're all in this game in Europe. You know it. Like, you're circling the bowl right now. The EU and even Britain, because you jumped out, but you're in it. It's circling the ball. You're the low pressure point. While Russia, China, India, South America, and that's about it, are growing and creating an alliance in a multipolar world. That we're talking about the changing of dollars and the US dollar. We're talking global.
Right.
We have effed up this thing so much, and there's no pulse for war. And I think at some point, there's no way that we're going to be able to do this unless we provoke some false flag, and we're trying hard as hell. And in worst case, it's like we're gonna have to start drawing down with no real structures, with always simmering. So we're just gonna like tension. We're not gonna have to realize, like, listen, we're on this marble here. Those are Russians, those are Chinese, those are Indian, those are South American. Let's get together. Let's figure this thing out. It's all about money. It's the capitalist idea killing humanity in a global scale, happening in real time. And we'll see it. And you know, the winter is coming. It's not just a Game of Thrones. It is happening this winter. Even on our little, I live in a very rich area, a very affluent area of northern New England on the coast, and you see it in Facebook. Am I going to have a Christmas, or am I going to have fuel in the tank, oil? I just got the oil bill. Am I going to have Christmas? These decisions are happening here. They're happening in Germany. They're happening in England. They're happening in France. They're going to happen all over the world. And these decisions that our leaders have made are disjointed to our public needs. And so this is coming. It's you know, like, even if we get through the winter, it's not going to be better at the act. It's not like we didn't get the winter. Spring is not bringing any change. It's bringing more depression and more horror and more war. And the leaders that we speak of are just promoting it and not afraid to like say, no, calm down. Xing met with the Biden for 2 seconds, and there was no real exchange. It's the first time they met in person. That was more because they met on through Zoom or on internet or whatever, computer. And they first time they met. And Xing said something the other day that it speaks to me. Housing is for people, not speculation. We don't have that in this country. That thought should be part of our political spectrum. Housing is for people. As the housing crisis we talked earlier is coming. Housing is for people, not speculation. And I'll toss it to E. And I thank you guys for giving me this forum to run my rants. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, well said. Last night I was watching a live stream with the Durand and Brian Berletic from the New Atlas, and it's the most in-depth, clarifying analysis on Ukraine. Some of the most in-depth that I've seen, because you know Brian, he's a ex-military man, and you know the Duran, especially with Alex McCarthyite, however you say his last name.
Yes.
You know, he does a lot of in-depth study, and the thing about this war, apparently, it's the way Russians, like the way they conducted the Syrian war. Right? They, when you're fighting a war, there are battles that, you know, the Russians think about their troops first. Right? They don't. It's not like, you know, they just push you out there and they, you know, leave you into the grinder. Russians, they primarily they think about their troops and equipment. So if it's a possibility, like when Kherson, there's the city of Kherson, and then there's the region of Kherson. 60% is the region. I think it's east of the Dnieper River. That's where the Russians are. They gave up the city, right? So the majority of Kherson is still under their control, and so historically, according to what they were sharing on that stream, the Russians don't mind giving up territory because they'll circle back later and recapture it, right? And
Yeah, World War
Brian,
II. World War
yeah,
II. They had they had they burned everything, retreated deep into Russia and burned everything behind them.
yeah, and when they were fighting in Syria, like there were cities that they gave up and then came back, later because for them their troops and their equipment is much more valuable than territory, especially territory where no one, not many people are still there. Like people who are still there is because they wanted to stay there. There were opportunities for them to evacuate and leave, and they were explained in the city that we are leaving, right? And they even took the hero of Kherson. They removed his, they excavated his remains, took down monuments, statues. They took all the valuable stuff away with them, and yeah, so it's something to think about because it goes back to Putin's original statement where he said the demilitarization of Ukraine, the denazification of Ukraine, and pretty much well that third demand is going to change now because the amount Russia has invested, the 20% of the territory that they have incorporated through their referendums. It's going to be more than that. It's going to be a land bridge. They have to establish a land bridge to Transnistria. So this is going to keep going on and on. And the last thing I would say, based on the analysis I've been looking at from those two streams, from those two channels, the Duran and the New Atlas, is that Russia has an industry, right, going back to the Soviet era, that they make tanks, they make boats, they make all this stuff, right? Whereas the US has been deindustrialized through NAFTA and beyond, so they have to put contracts and then bid the contracts, and the lowest bidder or the highest bidder, they got to go through months. And then before they actually make the stuff, that's going to take years, months and years to even be made, much less sent. And then you have to train them. You have to train the Ukrainians on this equipment. They have to be trained on these systems, anti-aircraft systems, like the missile. Apparently, from what I first read, it was 2 missiles, because what Brian was saying, the way the Soviets trained is they did a double tap with their missiles. Right? Because they send one, and right after, and he showed you video of their training, they send one, and then right after that, they send another one. So it's sort of like more assurance that in case you miss the first hit, the second hit is going to get it. So the Ukrainians, as part of their, Soviet culture and Soviet, being part of the Soviet Union, they're trained on the same system. So it was actually 2 missiles that the S-300s that went over there. And apparently they missed one of the cruise missiles or something coming from the Russian side, and it went. There was speculation that they fired it on purpose, but apparently it's an accident. Either way, you're definitely correct. Everybody was up in the hackles about it. It definitely could have triggered the next level. But if you notice throughout the whole thing, Russia never stopped their campaign. Right? They kept firing at the energy grids. They kept firing at the systems over there. They continue regardless. They didn't say, well, okay, oh my God, Article 5. They are ready. Yeah, they are ready to crush NATO, right? They are ready to crush NATO. They didn't stop. They didn't release a statement. They just said, look, we didn't do that. End of story. and they kept on with their campaign.
And that's why you have a division at the highest levels of the military now over what to do with this war. And so the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, I believe is his name, has essentially leaked information that he believes that now is the time to start negotiations, simply because, as Douglas McGregor said recently in a conversation on the Gray Zone with Aaron Mate, that he understands that on number one, the dynamics of the war are about to change because Russia's going to they're going to have many more troops enter the war. And number two, what you pointed out also, which is that the United States' ability to resupply Ukraine is substantially drained. I mean, we don't have. It takes time to make this equipment, and then they have to be trained on it, like you said. And then, of course, there's an enormous portion of it, up to 70%, it was estimated, that is being just stolen. That is
I forgot about that.
Immediately, sold on the black market, taken, of the equipment to begin with. So,
and remember, the U.S. have been training these guys since 2014. They got rolled up in about 6-8 months. And now they're conscript anyone over 18 to come into this war to fight. We can't send personnel. We are sending personnel. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
But we can't send personnel officially. So those people fighting that war are getting stuff. I can't. If you got me a new TV right now, it would take me 3 weeks to set up. I swear to God, it's so much technical. When you get a new bomb or new rocket launcher, these people don't even speak the same language. The instructions aren't even coming in Ukrainian. Well, it's not. You can't learn this thing on the fly when shit's hitting the fan. Right. So never mind half it's going. We don't know where it's going, and it's going, and all it will do will cause confusion and miss it, and it'll cause more ability to say that is so Why is that region so destabilized? Why is that region? Maybe because we flooded it for weapons on white supremacist ideology and like a geopolitical argument that we had nothing to do with. We just wanted all the land and fertilizer right there. So we got into it because it's all about extraction of money, not really morality. Again, I'm going to end it there because I know we're coming up on the top of the hour and I'm going to kick it back to the boss.
Talking about the connection, like their commitment, so I've asked a lot of people this question, I'll ask you both, the commitment that Russia has to the war versus the commitment of, and I'm talking the Russian government, but also the Russian people versus the West, the U.S. government, but also the American people, the European people. All right, here's a sign, an indicator of how much more important of this is to Russia than it is to the West. All right, Russia conscripted. They had the draft, and they have brought hundreds of thousands. They were originally shooting for 300,000, but they're going beyond that. Hundreds of thousands of new soldiers. Tell me, I have yet to find someone who can tell me seriously that you could institute a draft in this country or in Europe to go fight the Russians in Ukraine, and that there wouldn't immediately be a revolution in that country. There's the level of, and that tells you, and here's the most amazing thing, Putin's approval rating within Russia, even after the draft, is higher than any American politician. Like, it's in the 70-80% range. None of our politicians are that popular, even even without instituting a draft. So that tells you that country is behind that effort. Europe instead is being starved. They're being, they're paying an insane amount for energy. They're being deindustrialized. The United States paying, higher food prices, higher energy prices, the same thing. And I just want to end on this one thing that I want to ask you both about as well. And that is another great take from Kim.com and a video clipped over Klaus Schwab actually admitting that the era of U.S. dominance, unipolarity, is over. This is incredibly significant, I think, to hear this kind of admission coming at the G20 from WEF President Klaus Schwab of all people. So let me play this for everybody.
Just see if you could turn up your computer audio also. There's been some complaints in the chat over here.
Oh,
about
okay.
it.
Let me see if I can get it louder than it was before. All right, here we go.
But actually, what we have to confront is a deep, systemic, and structural restructuring of our world. And this will take some time. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process. Politically, the driving forces for this political transformation, of course, is the transition into a multipolar world, which has a tendency to make our world much more fragmented. And for these reasons, events like this one, the G20, and so on, are the very important connectors to avoid a too great segmentation, I would say, blockization instead of globalization of our world.
So there you have Klaus Schwab of all people admitting that this transition that's underway to multipolarity is inevitable, it's happening, and that it can't be. It's not turning back. Having to acknowledge it there in the G20, that's incredibly significant, I think. And the way he talks about it is also significant because he does so with like a kind of remorse and a reluctance, talking, characterizing it as a blockization, a regionalization, and I agree that kind of the division into the world of two Eastern and Western blocks, that would obviously be horrible. That's not what we want to. We don't want to go back to an Iron Curtain or that kind of division. But that kind of thing is entirely up to how the West acts and decides to conduct itself as a declining empire, and as a military power. Is the West going to impose, that kind of order? Is it going to force the militarization of the East by what it's doing in Ukraine? Is it going to push us to nuclear war? Or is it going to actually seize the opportunity to write a different set of a different global security architecture, a different development architecture that prioritizes shared prosperity to actually end imperialism, economic, colonial, financial, of militaristic, of all forms? Because the United States right now, it doesn't have a choice of reversing this decline as a global hegemon. And even if it did, it shouldn't want to. None of us should want to be the global hegemon. That should not exist in the 21st century. Instead, we have what it does have the option to do is to decide and to shape what the next world order is going to look like. Is it going to be something that is going to be as horrific as what the United States has done? The kind of imperialism that it's enforced? Is it going to be a world order of warring blocks? Is it going to be something that's a lot more collaborative and a lot more united? And that's really the choice that the United States has. That's really the choice that we as Americans have, and Europeans, people on the West, is to help create, truly abolish imperialism, truly abolish it.
Well, that has to do with coming understands of it,
Yeah.
and that's the whole critical race thinking. And I don't know if we'll be able to get control of our government to give a humanistic response to the geopolitics that are going on, because right now it's corporate capture of the two parties is evident. So do we get controls of the levers to put humanity? Because the sociopathic, fascistic ideas that run our country right now are going forward, and I hope we get the ability. I hope we can break it and all of a sudden get a third party. I mean, they're talking about third parties in England. We need third parties. We need our party, and our party has to be bigger than just our borders. It has to be as much as we can to expand people over profits and humanity. And like that's the most important thing. So can I answer how if the current people still running it, doesn't even matter Trump, Bush, or DeSantis. I don't even. Nothing changes. Nothing. And even if all of a sudden some young, I'm not even gonna say because I don't see people, but Pete Buttigieg all of a sudden president, nothing changes. Now, even if an independent, if Yang's Forward Party came forward, nothing changes. He is a little. It's not even. He's a Republican light. If we challenge real power with real argument, but how do we do that when the forces that control our narrative, i.e., older would be TV. Now social media are being controlled and manipulated with algorithms. So thought and community is dismissed and fringe, or you're a Russian, or you're this, or who are you working for? I mean, go right back to it. Who are you working for? I mean, seriously, that's where it's at. So I hope at some time we get control of the mechanisms, because I have children and I plan on. But forces of nature, geopolitical forces are going to force these issues faster than we can handle it right now. And our current leadership has no ability, no mechanisms to handle it. And that's a doom thought. But last thought, and next thought is like next week's week will be about People's Party Mutual Aid Society, because we're going to work on that into UE.
Well, I just wanted to finish with a last statement from the last segment we was talking about. That's very important. The equipment is not only running out and running low, and they can't replenish it because it's being destroyed by the Russian Federation. It's also not winterized, which is very important, right? All the Russian equipment is winterized. So, a lot of their small arms, their ballistic systems, intermediate rockets and stuff like that. A lot of that, when it gets cold over there, and it gets very, very cold, according to what's the guy that lives over there, always wearing the hat? I listen to him too, but his name, I'm just drawing a blank. Yeah, I think he's originally Chilean, but he lives.
Oh, you're talking about Gonzalo Lira?
Yeah, Gonzalo.
Yeah.
He was talking about how cold it gets over there. Sometimes colder than the North Pole, just because of that, that section of geography where they at, and the way the jet stream bends and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the equipment is going to be frozen and useless. It's just because it's not winterized. It's not made for battles. Most of American battles was in the Arabian Gulf, right? It was made for the hot, climates and stuff like that. So I just wanted to mention that, which is going to further escalate the destruction of the Ukrainian military. In terms of the multipolarity, part of the thing that, and this is something, again, I learned examining Duran and Gonzalo Lira and Brian Berletic and others. While Russia was doing the special military operation, Putin and Lavrov was going around, mending fences, explaining, to their partners, like, hey, don't freak out, but this is why we're doing this, right? They were building channels, they were building cooperation, they were building, that's how they got India with them. Because if you remember, India was going to be part of the Quad, right? They were going back to the West and going to be against China and against Russia, and especially with China. And because of the diplomacy and the constant talking and the constant negotiation of Lavrov and Putin, now India is in a pact with China. And you remember, even under Trump, India and China, they have this region way up to the north where they were fighting over, right? Like soldiers actually died shooting each other. The Indian and the Chinese soldiers, they actually killed a few from each side. So that was getting very, very serious. But a lot of that has been resolved. And, the BRICS, Saudi Arabia, is migrating towards going to join. Imagine that Saudi Arabia, which has been in the pocket of the U.S. since Lawrence of Arabia, right? And the breaking up of the Ottoman Empire, and
Yeah.
when the U.S. in the Suez Canal War, where the U.S. basically destroyed the British and the French and became the hegemon and created the petrodollar system, which is what everything that we were talking about, adumbrating around. So, based on what I've been seeing, and based on what I've been paying attention to, you see Russia, South Africa, and Brazil, even under Bolsonaro, was still part of. That's the B in the BRICS. That starts with Brazil, right? So they have a lot more cooperation. India and now Saudi Arabia, a lot more mutual respect, and a lot more, sort of like, okay, what you do in your country and your traditions and all of that, that's your business, right? We have to keep the energy going. We have to build, and they've been doing a lot of help, especially with China. They've been doing a lot of building up in Africa, bringing Africa into its orbit. A lot of the grain is being shipped, right? A lot of that grain, Russia wants it to go to Africa and developing countries. You never hear the U.S. talk like that. But when they do talk like that, they're doing it in exchange for creating a military base or some sort of terrorism cell they want to start there. They want to use people's countries as terror corridors, like they did with Libya and such. So I think it's a lot more cooperation with the BRICS countries. And the last thing I'll say, Jimmy interviewed this Democrat. Apparently he's an anti-war Democrat. And all the others, he was trying to go for Senate. He was being interviewed by that guy. And he said his fear, and I like the way he stated this, I forgot his name, but he did say something that was very pertinent, that his fear is the U.S. firing nukes on the way down, right? Because there's no question that it's sunsetting. And the deindustrialization that you mentioned, Nick, Germany is splitting between going to China and coming to the U.S. They're going to take all of Europe's industries, or as many as they can get, and bring it here and reindustrialize the U.S. while Europe dies and pretty much fades. They're going to wilt on the vine, die on the vine. But they're either going to come here or they're going to go to China, India, and these places. And that's going to be the end of Europe, right? The Marshall Plan, I believe it was a contract. Right? This is my theory. I didn't read it anyway. It's just thoughts in my head. I believe the idea of rebuilding Europe and rebuilding all the countries to bring them into the Western orbit. And, they created the UN and they created NATO, put all those Nazis up in there. And now the chits are in. Right now they're calling back their chits. So that's why you see Olaf Scholz and people like that destroying their own economy, destroying their own people, agreeing for the Nord Stream to be destroyed. Because these are debts that are owed to the U.S. and they're calling their debts back in. And they're basically going to own Germany and a lot of these great industrial sectors. They're going to use that to rebuild the U.S. And the ones who don't come to the U.S., you're going to have to go to China, right? And when you read, the ruble is doing better than ever, right? 6,000 plus sanctions, and the ruble is the best performing currency of the year, right?
Exactly.
So it's the multipolarity, and I agree with the guy. The concern of the U.S. firing nukes on its way down, like Nero was fiddling while Rome was burning. That's the thing we have to watch out for, because a rabid dog is the most dangerous kind of dog.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the transitions between hegemons have traditionally been marked by wars, but we can't afford that now that we have nuclear wars. Second World War marked the transition between the UK as the global hegemon, to the United States, and so we, you know, uh, the global South, the non-aligned countries, Latin America, Africa, the BRICS, every country that is not that sees the lunacy of what's happening and the nuclear brinksmanship, by the West, has to stand up. This desperate attempt to keep the empire together, through sheer militarism, has to stand up in the United Nations. They have to stand up in these global meetings. Unfortunately, didn't happen to the G20, but they have to stand up. They have to coalesce. They have to coalesce themselves and start opposing, putting forward resolutions themselves at the United Nations, opposing the unipolarity, opposing the United States, opposing Western hegemony. Because this time the United States is basically playing Russian roulette with the world, and it's not, the world doesn't have an option here. And we pulled the trigger once, or more than once perhaps, but we pulled it on Tuesday. When the rocket landed in Poland, and that could have triggered Article 5. That could have led to nuclear war. And that's what happens when you go right up to the edge of nuclear war. No miscalculation, or no accident, or no rogue action, or no false flag attempt. I mean, anything can send you over the edge when you play that kind of game the United States is playing. So, Buzzy.
There was a meme. There was a
Go
meme the other
ahead.
day. There was a meme the other day of 6 chambers in Russian roulette. There was 1 chamber with the Soviet. In American roulette was 3 chambers with Democrat, and the other 2 chambers Republican, and that's American roulette. And I'll let you finish, boss. But you get a better chance, right? It's like,
national suicide.
Yeah, that exactly. That's where we stand. So, but Orobos, Buzzy, great doing the podcast with you guys as always. Great to see everybody.
It was
awesome. Good to talk to you. So we'll
enjoy
be back.
Thanksgiving.
We'll put out when the next podcast is coming up.
Shout out to the people in the chats too.
Exactly. Thank you to everyone who's been participating. Absolutely. We want to make it even more interactive in the future. So great to see you all, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good night.
Peace.